How we doing, Pyromaniacs? I'm RotoHeat Rick here with RotoHeat Craig, and today we are going to be talking about DraftKings wide receivers. We're going to go through all the wide receivers, talk about which ones we like for cash, which ones we like for GPP, maybe some leverage plays, some value plays, etc. Before we get into it, make sure you hit that subscribe and like button, and we will get right into this wide receiver video.
Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire.
So, Craig, how are you doing today?
I'm good. It's here. It's finally here.
It is crazy. We are finally talking about actual DraftKings lineups, and I'm so excited, and I'm terrified at the same time.
Hell yeah, man. Let's win some money.
Why don't we just get right into this? Is there a wide receiver, when you've looked at the pricing and everything, that just stuck out to you as this guy's got to be in the majority of my lineups?
Yeah, and so full disclosure, I'm usually not the guy that spends up a lot at wide receiver, but I think this week going with Julio is almost as safe as you can get. Great game script, I think. Great Vegas over-under. I think everybody will be on this game, but on different players in it. So I think spending up $7,700 for Julio, premier wide receiver, is how I'm going to do it for a lot of my both cash and GPPs, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that is a great leverage play because I'm expecting Calvin Ridley, and you and I talked about this, Calvin Ridley and DK Metcalf to be two very popular players, and going away from them and going with Julio and Lockett, if you're doing a game stack, I think you're differentiating yourself from the field and GPPs right there. And you can also, I mean, this is a game that you're going to see a lot of full game stacks where you're going to have either Matt Ryan or Russell Wilson, and then you're going to have, two wide receivers from one team and then one wide receiver from another team, and you're probably going to see some 2-and-2s as well from that game, with it being one of the highest over-unders and one of the most likely to shoot out with two capable quarterbacks and receiving options. For me, looking at the top, obviously, Michael Thomas always sticks out, especially when he plays at home. The guy averaged like 28 points at home last year. Just crazy stats at home. He's always viable. I think when you look at the overall scope of things in every position, a lot of people in cash games are going to be choosing between Michael Thomas and Christian McCaffrey. Yep. Which one? You're going to see one of the other probably in a lot of cash lineups, depending on how people build those out. But, I mean, the guy's got 40-point upside, so he's viable in every format. But Devontae Adams kind of sticks out to me as well, as if you're going to try to get away from that Tampa Bay New Orleans game or Seattle Atlanta game. Here's a guy that at the end of last year scored over 20 points, like 4 out of his last 5 games or 5 out of his last 6 games, getting targeted 12, 15, 10, 11 times a game. And as Bears fans, we know, because we've heard the rumblings from the Packer fans over the summer, they did not add anything to that wide receiver core. Devontae Adams is the target hog in that offense, and I have zero qualms with going away from either of those, because he's sandwiched in between both of those games. When you look at the wide receiver group, it goes TB New Orleans, Seattle Atlanta, then TB with Godwin and Evans below. You can get away from both those games, differentiate yourself, and I think Adams he could get lost in the shuffle there with a lot of people targeting those games.
And you know what's great about Adams and Julio and Thomas too, but one of the things that I'm trying to do this week is really put an emphasis on continuity, right? Teams that basically stayed intact, didn't have coaching changes, didn't have quarterback changes. We know 2020's nuts. So football's unpredictable, but we know, no matter what, that Aaron Rodgers is going to be throwing the ball to Devontae Adams. We've seen it. That's what he does. They got nobody else. They tried to bring in Devin Funchess, and he opted out. So you're right. Adams is a sweet play. And, he's almost $2,000 less than Michael Thomas. That's great.
Oh, yeah. You get to save some, and you may get the same amount of targets. And both quarterbacks are older, but neither of them are invaluable targets. So definitely nice there. Now, moving down a little bit, when you see these other two Buccaneers right next to each other with Godwin and Evans, do you have any interest in them in GPPs? For me, it's a no-go for cash games. I could see either the three guys above them in cash games. But these two are stay away for me in cash games. But I think there could be some interest there for GPPs.
Yeah, I'm with you. Full fade for cash. If you got to do one or the other in GPPs, and it's so hard to know, but I would think that Evans probably has the higher boom ceiling. Again, everyone assumes this Tampa Bay offense is going to be great, right? Because here comes Tom Brady. But we don't know that to be true. And Evans, great NFL receiver, right? 1,000 yards every season. You can count on it. But last year, he was either getting you 40 points or like 6. So if I had to put one in a GPP lineup, I'd probably go Evans. I think I'd probably rather save the salary and move down a little bit. I mean, I think DJ Moore is a great option. There's a lot of great options that are still, upper tier wide receivers.
Yeah, if I'm prioritizing one in GPPs over the other, it's definitely Evans, because you talked about that boom bust. Lattimore shut him down last year, and people are going to remember that. People are going to look at Tom Brady and say he can't throw deep, so that's not good for Mike Evans. I think Mike Evans is a better receiver than that. I don't think he's just a one-dimensional receiver, though we saw that with Jameis Winston. So yeah, there's definitely boom potential there if you're targeting that game and you're building a stack out. I'm probably going to prioritize Mike Evans over Godwin for ownership purposes and for that ceiling purpose that you mentioned. Excuse me, saving salary. So when we're moving down here in this 6,000 to 6,800 range, who's sticking out to you there?
Two people that I love. I mentioned DJ Moore earlier. I think there's another target hog playing at home. New quarterback, new coaching staff, I get it, but I do not believe that the Raiders have improved very much on defense, and DJ Moore is without question the best wide receiver on that team. So I love him. I'm also a sucker for DJ Chark. Not a good matchup. The Jaguars are trying to lose, but man, we just saw what him and Minshew can do for fantasy purposes last year, so I love him too.
Yeah, I'm not on either of those guys real hard, mostly because, when we look at Vegas scores, they're not projected for a lot of scoring in those games. And then obviously DJ Moore is always competing with CMC for not only touchdowns, but targets as well. When I look at this group, there's not a lot of guys that I feel great about putting in my cash lineups outside of maybe Allen Robinson. I feel like he's the safest play out of this group. Keenan Allen would normally be in that conversation, but we don't know what that offense is going to do. We talked about new quarterback coming in, everything like that. Mitch Trubisky's not good, but he targets the hell out of Allen Robinson, and we want volume, and we're not going to get much more volume out of this group than him. And then looking at, if you're going to get into a game stack, I don't think a Chicago Bears game stack in GPP is crazy. Trubisky, as bad as he's been, has been very good against the Lions. 3 out of his last 4 games, he's went over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Lions. So he has that. I like this team, because they funnel all the targets through Robinson and Miller now that Gabriel's gone. That's what the expectation is, and you can stack that up nice, and you don't have to worry a lot about outside guys getting a ton of action outside of, Cohen's going to get some. There might be a little bit for the tight ends, but nothing big enough to take away from Miller and Robinson. But I don't know if I'm going to lay my hat on any bear in cash games just because I'm not confident enough in Mitchell Trubisky, and I do not want to waste that lineup.
And that's what I think it would be. I would love to be able to play some of our hometown Bears in cash, but we have seen Trubisky overthrow Miller all the time. The only reason he doesn't throw Allen Robinson is such a freak that he'll lay out for every pass and get to him. You're right. They got rid of Gabriel. Ted Ginn's going to try to run deep, but it's not like any of our quarterbacks could hit him anyway. So they're probably all off limits for cash. I do have one GPP lineup with Trubisky and Robinson and Cohen in it, so we'll see. We briefly hit – he's in the price range. We briefly hit on Lockett in that price range if you're stacking that Seattle-Atlanta game. And Tyler Boyd at 6,100, we know he's got skills. We don't know what that team is going to look like. We're all assuming A.J. Green's healthy. We don't know that, but Tyler Boyd could be a nice little pickup in that range.
Yeah, I think that especially if you're gonna stack, if you're excited about this Cincinnati offense with Joe Burrow at the helm, and you're gonna stack that game, Tyler Boyd's got to be the first guy that you plug in there in that wide receiver group. We don't know about A.J. Green. We hope he plays for Tyler Boyd's benefit because Tyler Boyd has always been better with A.J. Green on the field, but this guy is definitely one of the most underrated wide receivers in the league, but is the upside there in GPPs? He may, once we learn about this Cincinnati team, we learn about Joe Burrow a little bit, Tyler Boyd could be a staple in cash games because of his volume and skill level, similar to Keenan Allen used to be a staple in all my cash games because I knew he was getting 10 targets and, didn't have a lot of deep ball, didn't have a lot of high upside until he started getting deeper as his career has progressed. But definitely a lot of options in GPPs in this area, right? Like all these guys are viable in GPPs, even going down to if Parker, he's got that Q next to his name right now, but we know the high upside that he has with Ryan Fitzpatrick. So you've got a lot of GPP options in there. But you're going to want to lay your hat on some people and overweight the field if you're going to go all out on some of these guys. Getting into the 5,000 to 6,000 range, you see a couple of those Cleveland wide receivers there. Do you have any interest in a game where Baltimore's favored by like 9? We know that if the game script goes that way, Cleveland's going to be throwing a lot, and you've got two premium talents here at 5,900 looking to rebound after a very bad 2019 season.
Yeah, I really want to be in love with Beckham and Landry, but there's a lot of these games that on this slate that I want to see it first, right? I want to see what Cleveland looks like because can I see the game script where Baltimore jumps out to a big lead and then Baker is just throwing to Beckham and Landry all day? Sure. But I could also see the game script where the Browns come out in 12 personnel and just try to slow the ball and have clock control. We know Baltimore has an awesome defense. We saw Baker make bad decisions and get happy feet last year. So again, if you're multi-entering, heck yeah, you build a couple Browns lineups. But if you're only gonna spend a couple bucks to enter a couple lineups, I'm probably fading them, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's probably not going to be the game that I target the most, but I probably will have some Baltimore stacks in my multi-entry GPPs where I've got Lamar Jackson with a Marquis Brown or a Mark Andrews, or maybe even both, and then a comeback player, one of these guys, an Odell or a Landry, or maybe even a Kareem Hunt when we talk about running backs. But the way that game is lining up, if Baltimore does get out to that big lead, there's definitely going to be targets here for these two guys. Then we got DK Metcalf, who we both said, he's probably one of the highest owned wide receivers on this slate. Typically, in that case, Metcalf's probably a cash game option. Probably actually going to be in my cash game lineup. Because of not only the fact that they've also got that shortened target tree in Seattle with him and Lockett, but DK Metcalf as a rookie led the entire league in end zone targets, very high efficiency targets from Russell Wilson, and for cash game purposes, we want all the touchdown opportunity we can get. So I think for cash games, almost an easy plug-in for me, but I'm probably going to go Lockett in most of my cash game or GPPs, to get leverage off of that DK Metcalf ownership.
Yeah, absolutely. And we should probably remind some of the listeners, maybe they're tuning in for the first time. With GPP, you want to differentiate yourself and get that crazy high ceiling. With cash, you want floor, you want dependability, you want opportunity, and that's what DK's giving you. We saw, he's a grown man, right? He is a beast, and Wilson loved targeting him down the field and in the end zone. So in a game that's supposed to have a good over-under and has the opportunity to shoot out in cash, heck yeah, you put that guy in your lineup, $5,800, sleep like a baby.
Going down the list just a little bit, we've got my other cash game plug-in, and that's Terry McLaurin at 5,600. This guy is the target tree for Washington right now. Yeah. There's a little Steven Sims, there's the Antonio Gibson hype. It's definitely Terry McLaurin, and then whoever else appears at whatever game, whenever in the game, whatever. There's nobody else that you feel confident that is going to get targets. This dude might have a 30% target share in this offense, and we've seen him just explode. Very consistent at the beginning of the last year, and then there was kind of a little stretch where he wasn't as consistent, but then he brought it back towards the end of the year. And at 5,600 in a game that Washington is likely trailing the entire game, this could be a 12 to 15 target game for Terry McLaurin. Matchup is a little bit harder than we would have seen last year from Philly because they have Darius Slay now. But I think Terry McLaurin's the type of talent that at 5,600, if he gets the 10 to 12 targets, he's going to exceed value easily.
Yeah, he's poor man's Devontae Adams, right? He's the only guy there. Even if it's garbage time, we love garbage time for DFS. Yep. You don't have any concerns about Haskins? I know he flashed a little bit at the end, but that might be the only thing that could hold him back.
I do have concerns, but I just think the volume's going to be too high at this price. Typically your 10 to 12 target guy, which I definitely believe McLaurin can get to this week, is 7,000 to 8,000, not 5,600. So there's leeway, even if it's if McLaurin goes for 6 catches out of his 12 targets, a 50% completion rate, he's probably still getting you 70 yards, and you're not going to be upset about 13 points from your $5,600 quarterback or wide receiver in cash. And that's probably the floor if he hits 6 catches. So I think there's upside there, and there's a pretty high floor just based off of the volume he should get in that offense. I mean, I don't think the Antonio Gibsons and the Steven Sims and the Logan Thomases, if you're on that train, are going to pull away from McLaurin's target share in that offense.
No. I think you're right. I think he should be locked and loaded in cash. And I mean, he's even a tournament play too.
Yes, absolutely.
Let me ask you a question. Same range, little further down, a guy that I personally always love. Don't love him against my team, but Marvin Jones, right? Detroit looked pretty good last year when Stafford was healthy, and Marvin's been every bit as good as Galladay, but he's, $1,500 less. How you feel about that?
Okay, my leverage play for that game is to play Marvin Jones over Galladay, and in a lot of weeks it is. Now, I don't feel comfortable with those guys in cash games, but when you're talking about GPPs, if let's say you want to stack, one of my favorite stacks so far as I've been doing lineups is the Philly stack with Wentz and then Desean Jackson coming back with McLaurin and then going like Anthony Miller and Marvin Jones, and then loading up on two of the top tier running backs, because you've saved a lot of money and you've got two very viable stacks and a lot of money to spend. So that's definitely one route that I've been going, but I think that game is going to be low enough owned that you can play Galladay too, just because of Bears defense. People are going to see Bears defense, but they don't realize that Matt Stafford throws on everybody, and if you're going to get yards against the Bears, it's going to be through the air. So both of those wide receivers are probably viable in GPPs this week. I just wouldn't go there in cash games myself. But there is a guy here that I think is cash game viable, a little more risky than I normally go, but a Marquis Brown at 5,100 in that game that we talked about with Ravens having the highest team total on the week. The guy is going to get enough targets that his floor should be higher than we may expect it to be. And at 5,100, he helps you get those running backs in there. In cash games, I like to get, and we'll talk about this in the running back video, but I like to get as much volume in my cash lineups as possible. But Marquis Brown is also a viable GPP play because he's got that 40-point upside that we've seen in week 1 last year. So, in the last game, he had 11 targets. I don't think this team is going to be as efficient, so they're not going to score as easily, which means they're probably going to run more plays, which is going to be more targets for Mark Andrews, Marquis Brown, who right now are the guys that we think are the funnel in the passing game, unless a Boykin or a Duvernay or one of the other 87 tight ends that they always have on their team, get in there. But
right.
But then obviously the running back trio that they've got. But I think Marquis Brown just gets enough volume and has tremendous upside at wide receiver that you can play him in any format.
Definitely GPP viable. I hadn't really considered him in my cash lineups, but you make a good argument for it. Even if Lamar targets Andrews as often as he did last year, there's still Andrews is not a wide receiver, right? Like everyone's in love with Mark Andrews, and he's awesome. Don't get me wrong, but he's not taking down 12, 15 targets in this game. So Marquis Brown that's an interesting cash play. I don't know if I have the stones for it, but I like it. I like the upside for sure.
I think you'll see it quite a bit, but not as often as the next guy that I'm going to talk about, and that is Desean Jackson at 4,900. If you're talking about boom or bust and putting him in any lineup, Desean Jackson's going to get volume because nobody else is alive for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Nope.
With Rager going down, Alshon Jeffrey's down. Right now it is Goddard, it is Ertz, and then it is Jackson. and that's the 3. And then you're going to probably get some Greg Ward sprinkled in there. Until we see anything out of Arcega-Whiteside, it's, pure strictly deep GPP, like 100,000 person contest play. And then Desean Jackson is viable everywhere because while he typically doesn't get you those 10 to 12 targets, this is a game where he could get you 10 to 12 targets because nobody else is alive.
Yeah, and we all remember week 1 last year, right? I don't know how many targets he got. I don't remember, but I know 2 of them went for ridiculously long touchdowns.
He had 9 targets, 8 receptions with a 53-yard long and 2 touchdowns. And I think both of them were like 50 and 53 yards for his touchdowns in that game. 154 yards.
It's one of the things I remember so clearly of last year, and I've just been waiting for it to come back around. And he's healthy now, and that's what we care about. This isn't season long, right? We need him for 1 game. So I agree. He's locked in all my lineups, virtually all of them. I love him.
Yeah, I think he's going to be so highly owned in GPPs that I'm going to prioritize some Marquis Brown and maybe even a little Henry Ruggs. Hoping Ruggs has that first game that we've seen from Marquis Brown last year, just because of ownership and getting leverage on the field. When we go below that, there's very few players that I'm comfortable with for cash. I think there are some viable tournament options with Steven Sims Jr. if you think he's the 2 in Washington. With Curtis Samuel, if you're stacking that Carolina-Las Vegas game that a lot of people think can shoot out, because both have very bad defenses. That game isn't about prolific offenses. It's about horrendous defenses. Just to get that out there. Preston Williams in Miami, they have no targets. They have nobody to throw to outside of Parker, Gesicki, and Williams. And he's 4,500, and this was a guy that was commanding 9 to 10 targets when he got injured last year. So if he's healthy going into this game at 4,500, Preston Williams is somebody that I want to have some action on.
Oh, God. I love Preston Williams in this game, especially for the reasons you mentioned. Also, I think people are going to be scrolling down. They're going to see that bright red first for defensive opponent ranking in the Patriots, not remembering that the Patriots had a whole lot of people opt out. They're a completely different team. Playing opposite of Devontae Parker opened stuff up for Williams. I love Fitzmagic, the gunslinger. I love the game script in this game. I could see this game shooting out, actually. And Williams is so cheap. I think we'll talk about this in other videos that we'll do, but there's very little running back value this week. So you got to find value somewhere else. And it's, unless you're punting tight end, then it has to be with receiver. So these guys, even though they may not be the sexiest names, but the Preston Williams and the Desean Jacksons down in this price range, I mean, I think they're gold. I think you got to have one of those 2 guys.
And there's a bunch of upside, but then as you get going down, unless you're gonna try playing, Ayuk if he's healthy for San Francisco, who has nobody to throw to. It gets very iffy until maybe Bryan Edwards is a guy in GPP only that I'll have some action on, because we talked about that game, terrible defenses, and Las Vegas has nobody else to throw to besides Waller and Ruggs, unless you're a Renfro fan. But, that guy just catches it and then falls, so I don't want much of him. But that's about the bottom of where I'm willing to go at wide receiver. Paris Campbell down here at 3,900 if you're a truther of his. He's definitely viable in GPP.
Yeah. I think he's a good GPP play. I think he's super talented. Last year didn't work out for him, but here's the other thing. I think Phillip Rivers can't throw a deep ball to save his life anymore. So I see Hilton's value taking a big hit, but Campbell becoming that like Keenan Allen type guy for Rivers. So I could see for 3,900 in a GPP, I could see it happen.
Yeah, I think if I'm playing Campbell, I'm playing that's in a Rivers lineup. In a stack lineup, I'm probably not playing him as a solo option. I don't know. I'm not as comfortable with it. I feel like T.Y. Hilton is the one that benefits and Campbell is the one that gets hurt by the non-deep ball at this point. But we're going to see. That's the beautiful thing about this Sunday is that this stuff's going to start coming to fruition. We're going to get a better idea of how teams are going to use these guys. But after that, unless you're taking a dart throw at an Isaiah Ford or a the other guy that I was looking at, Jakeem Grant, because Miami has nobody to throw to.
Right.
You know, there's okay. If we find out, and I'll say this, if we find out that Chicago's plan is to give Cordarrelle Patterson 15 carries in this game at wide receiver at 3,400, you can put him in your lineup. And I don't care what lineup it is, if you trust that Nagy's actually going to follow through with it. 3,400, wide receiver, if he's getting 15 carries, if he's the running back, you can play him.
Heck yeah, you could play him. I like it.
He is going to be the goal line back no matter what, I think. Because Nagy's just got that infatuation with him that drives me insane.
I know. I don't. Whatever. This is not a Bears rant podcast. So.
All right. That is going to be it for the wide receivers. Make sure you go down in the comments if there's somebody that you like that we didn't talk about. Any questions you have, put them in there in the comments. And make sure you get over to Facebook and search for the RotoHeat DFS group. And also, RotoHeat.com Discord. Get in our Discord chat. We talk there throughout the entire week about DFS, showdowns, stacks, leverage plays, pivot plays, everything DFS all throughout the week. So make sure you get in there. It is free. And Craig, anything else on these wide receivers?
Gosh, no, other than now I'm on this Cordarrelle Patterson thing. So let's go. Let's go Patterson. Let's win $1 million.
$1 million sounds great. That's for sure. We will be back with our running back, tight end, and QB videos here very soon. Also, right there, playlist. Hit it. Watch the videos. Do it. You want to.